Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to change oil in my 2015 Kawasaki Vulcan VM900 Custom. There's other videos online to show how to do this too, but I figured I'd just do my iteration of it. So the bike's cold right now, just out of the garage. It's a rainy day, figured it's a good time to get the oil change, get this thing ready up for the next ride. But first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start it and let it run for a couple minutes, warm up, just so the helps with the getting the oil fluid and being able to move, and it won't be so viscous, and should drain out a lot easier. So as that's running, I'm gonna go ahead and get the tools that I need. So I'll go ahead and tell you up front, it's a 17mm wrench for the plug on the bottom, and then 10mm socket or wrench, whatever you want to use, for the rectifier bolts to take it off so we can get to the oil filter. But let's get this thing running and gather some tools. All right, so the bike's warmed up. The oil plug is gonna be on the left side of the motorcycle, up underneath on the shifter side, and it's this large bolt right here. That's a 17mm. So with it on the kickstand, I am gonna go ahead and get my drain pan slid up under it, break it loose, and let the oil be draining out. And while that's draining out, we'll take this rectifier off, which is right on the front of the bike, right under the radiator. And we're gonna take these bolts out, and then I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so the oil plug is out. Once I got the oil plug out and it started draining, I went ahead and cracked the oil fill location just so it'll help vent it. Took off those two 10mm bolts that holds this rectifier cover on. So then the next thing we're gonna do is there's two more 10mm bolts, one here and here, and this is gonna let the rectifier go and swing down out of the way and give us access to this filter. Now on the bike, it has a K&N filter on it, which is what I'm gonna be replacing it with, is another K&N filter. And these have the wrench end on them. So you can see that's the part number, and this also uses that same 17mm wrench that we used to take the oil plug out. Now the oil that I'm putting in this bike is the 1040 Valvoline. I use this in all my bikes, so I've always had good luck out of Valvoline products. So that's the next step. I'm gonna take that off, take the oil filter off, and I'll show you that. After taking the rectifier off, the bracket that holds the rectifier off needs to come off too, so we can take this oil filter straight out. So again, those are two more 10mm bolts that's holding this in. So we'll get those removed, and then we'll remove the oil filter. With the bracket off, I can get to the oil filter easily with my 17mm wrench. So I went ahead and took it off. I'm gonna give this a few minutes and just let it all drain out real good. And as you can see, it's still running pretty steady there. So give it 5 minutes or so, just to let all the oil get drained out of it. And then I'll go in and just take a rag and clean up where the sealing location will be, and just the area in general where I've got oil dripping onto the starter. I'll just take a rag and clean all that up. And then once I give it that time to drain and I've got it cleaned up, I'll take some of the old oil off this filter and rub it around and dab it on my finger, and then rub it around the seal of the new oil filter. And that's just going to help with the seating and the sealing of the new one. So another thing you always want to check when you take oil filters off is that the O-ring has stayed on the oil filter, because sometimes they'll dry and stick to the engine, and then you can double gasket it, and then you're going to have a bad leak. So just always make sure your filter has its O-ring still on it. But 5 minutes, come back, put that on. All right, I let it drain. Then I went ahead and cleaned it up in there with a rag, put this oil filter on. I put it on by hand. I put it on as tight as I can get it by hand, and then I'll put my wrench on it and give it a quarter turn. So you don't want to crank those down on there and risk stripping out the threads on the filter or even on the housing itself. And plus, that's that rubber seal in it. Once it heats up, it's gonna make a good seal. So you don't have to put those on there with all your might. But now, since that's in there, I'll go ahead and put this bracket back on. And like I said, all this stuff, I'm just gonna put it in there. I'll run the bolts up until it's snug, and then I'll probably give them like a quarter turn. I'm not too worried on torque specs on this stuff, but I'm not gonna overly tighten it either, because none of this is
none of these bolts obviously are going to take a lot of torque anyway. So put that back on there, put the rectifier back on, put the cover back on, and then I'm going to tilt it back up and put the oil drain plug in. Same with it, I'm going to run it in until it stops by hand, and then I'll probably just give it an 1/8 of a turn, because this is aluminum and this will strip out really easy and you will damage this. So you just want to be gentle with it, but we'll get that put together and then we'll start adding some oil. One other thing I wanted to show you guys is when you put this on, there's some adjustment here. So what I always do is I'll start the top one and then start the bottom one and then push up on it as high as I can get it and tighten it down. That's just way it's lifted up, and at its high setting it's more centered when you put your cover back on. So let me show you. So it's gonna line up better. Just wanted to stop and show you that if you're wondering about why there's adjustment in it. Like I said, pressure on it as you tighten it so it's all the way at the top. Alright guys, so I got the plug back in on the side, cleaned up everything, and then I went ahead and put 3 quarts in. So just get you a funnel, but obviously put it in there, start pouring it in. So I've still got the bike on the kickstand. You can either chalk the bike up with a 4x4 or something to where it's level. I'm just going to tilt it up here by hand. Grab the fork and show you. The sight glass underneath here, as you can see right now, shows that it's full. But that's without any oil being in the filter. So I'm going to start it up and let it run a second or two, and then I'll show you what the oil level looks like after that, where I believe we'll probably have to add another 1/2 quart because the manual calls for basically 3.4 quarts. So let's start it up and see what it looks like. Just get it balanced here, can I show you? It's halfway on the sight glass, as you can see. But go add that basically 0.4 or 1/2 quart. I'll go a little bit shy of it. And this thing will be ready for another season of riding. Thanks for following along on this oil change. If you guys have any questions or comments, just drop them below and I'll try to get to them. But subscribe, follow, look me up on Instagram, Mustang Jackson, and tag along if you like seeing these kinds of builds and give me some suggestions. But until next time, let's keep building.